There are ways we have to handle everything in life. God has provided us with that in his instruction book, with his guidance that he has given to us. And with that, we want to make sure we're doing it his way. It's very easy for us, and you see it a lot, even in the Christian body, in which we're doing things our way, and we're not, and we want God to bless it. We want it, we kind of take God for granted. There's really no reverence in it. This is a very good question somebody brought up in Bible study, and I want to make sure we get an understanding of it, and then we can talk about it some more. So, the question we're asking today is, what are Christians' responsibilities to others? Okay, our lives are a ministry and encouragement. So, what does that mean? That's the name of this order, my steps. Okay, so with understanding this, let's first see what most say, and I think we all mean well when we say this. We tend to think the human priority in our lives looks like this, in which we say, first God, family next, and then we kind of sort them as we see fit. Some will put the kids first, some will put the spouse first, some will put their parents first, however that is. They'll kind of mix those up. Then we have associates. That could be, friends and work co-workers, things like that, however that fits in there, and others. So how and in what order we kind of sort it ourselves. Now, the problem with this is we may say God first, and unfortunately what that usually means is what we're going to do is, make sure we pray first. Maybe we go to church and we'll read our Bible. The problem is we think we already did everything we need to for God, and we'll allow each other item to stand on its own. Now, at times we'll apply God, but we'll still have different ways of how we are with our family, how we are with friends and associates, how we are with others. You'll watch people deal with it differently. But how could that be when we have instruction from God on how to do it? And when we put it in order like this, sometimes we'll allow our set of priorities to get in the way of what God expects us to do. What do I mean by that? Well, let me show you the true priority of what the Bible says. It shows us that God shouldn't just be first, he should be always. And I think when I did the study years ago, I gave a diagram, and the first diagram was like 5 or 6 circles, and each circle represented somebody, and it was God was the first circle, and family was the second circle, and associates, and so on and so forth. And each circle was in place. But then I showed how it should be. I drew one big circle, and that circle was God. Every other circle was inside that circle, because what it means is we deal with all others through God, and God purposed only. Let's see how this works. We're going to feel how we accomplish this. Now, we have to know the ultimate goal for all relationships is shown here in 1 Corinthians 10:31. This is the ultimate goal. What am I doing in all these relationships? So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Now, I know sometimes because we don't really grasp this, do we know what it means to do it for the glory of God? This means we're magnifying God. It comes in 2 forms, in which we're honoring God and which we're displaying God. Okay, we did a whole study on glorifying God, and you want to take a look at that. But he's saying even from the smallest things, he's saying whatever you do, glorify God. So if I do it my way, am I glorifying God? And this is where we understand that when I put them in that order, how am I dealing with the other ones? Is everything dealt through God, based on God, is what I have to ask. You see, God is the priority in everything we do, dealing with everybody we deal with. In Matthew 22:37-38, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment." And he said the word all. Now think about that, because I know we like to say, well, he wants us to divide. No, he said all. That means all my love, all my heart, all my soul, my mind, everything I do is for God. And you're like, well, then how can we do the second part, which we're going to see? Well, the way we do it is by loving God. When I give him all, I will then fall into the second, and it'll show that clearly, if that makes sense. You understand? It will fulfill itself in that sense. Okay? So this all that we're giving him will make us love ourselves, which in turn we will give to others if we truly love God. Now, what do I mean if we truly love God? Well, I think a lot of people are getting caught up in emotional love and the love that we like to define as human beings. But like Jesus stated, he does exactly what his father says. We are to live with the same relationship. Okay? We have to use the same focus and realize this. In fact, the evidence that we love him will be us living, obeying him. Did you catch that? All right. That'll be the evidence that we truly love him when we live obeying him. Look what he says in John 14, verse 21. Whoever has my commands and obeys them. So the first phase is has his commands. That's a person who's in the word, who's in church, who's asking questions, and I want exactly what my father is telling me. So that's the first phase of it. Okay. But not only has my commands, but then he says, and obeys them. Obeying them is a action, is a lifestyle. It says he is the one who loves me, right? The way humans do it is because I said I love you. Don't you know I love you? All of this is how will you know if you love God? See the evidence. Are you and do you have what he says in his word? And are you and do you apply them? It says, he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love him and show myself to him. All right, so he makes that very clear for us to grasp and understand God's love is always there. And he said he'll never leave us, never forsake us. And God so loved the world, he's showing all of that. And that's why the minute somebody backslides and turns away from God, and the eternity people will say, well, just because they did that, God didn't stop loving them. It has nothing to do with God not loving them. Do you understand that? What happens is we leave that love. God didn't stop anything. We decline that love. You see, God always loves us, but our obedience will keep us in his love. Our obedience will keep us so we have that love he offers to all. John 15, verse 10, it says, if you obey my commands, you will remain in my love. Did you notice that? Did you notice that? So we like to just think his love just follows us everywhere. But no, I have to remain in him. And how do I remain in him? By doing what he says. And you're seeing it straight from the word. He says, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. Do y'all see the clarity of this? Do y'all see the understanding of how we have this relationship? When I love the Lord my God with all my heart, my mind, and soul, I have to show it by what I do. This is going to lead to how we deal this with others. And you got to realize when we dive into this, no matter what, God trumps all others. Okay? Acts 5:21, I made that clear because you're going to see us go through some things and say some things, but God trumps all others. And you're going to see that in a lot of these. But he says in Acts 5, verse 29, Peter and the other apostles replied, we must obey God rather than men. Okay? So we gathered this. So we see how God is not first, he's always. Everybody else, how do we deal with them? Has to be through God. So how do we display this godly priority to all? How is this shown? Pay close attention. What I'm going to do, and I took some scriptures. This would be a book if I took all the scriptures concerning each of the groups and I picked some of the groups of people in our lives just to show you our responsibility to them. It's not just my child is my priority. The rest of y'all have to take a back seat. No, it's I know my responsibility to my child. I know my responsibility to my spouse. I know my responsibility to people I work for. I know my responsibility to that stranger. I know, y'all see where I'm going with this? Okay, these responsibilities still stand. I cannot allow my priority to dictate what I do. All of it has to be led by God. So let's look at the first one. Christians' relationships with other Christians. Okay, we understand, hopefully we grasp this. Romans 12, 9 through 11 says, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, Honor one another above yourselves. That's a Christian relationship. Remember, when he says love must be sincere, there's a verse that shows us true sincerity is not based on me. The world teaches us when I'm sincere, it's based on me. But see, I'm not sincere even in me. Right? When it says love must be sincere, it means I'm going to love even when I don't feel it, even when I don't think it, but I'm doing it because God said it. And my actions is going to show hate to evil, and you're going to see me not budge from good. This is in that relationship with other Christians. And then he says, be devoted to one another in how? Brotherly love. The only way you can have that Philadelphia love, that's what that means. The word is translated when it uses brotherly love to Philadelphia. That's why we call it the city of brotherly love. It's going to show that relationship can only happen with Christians. It's a spiritual love. It's to love as a brother, right? So I'm going to do that. I won't allow how I feel, my clicks, and all that other stuff to get in the way. I recognize this is a brother I must love the way God says, and I must honor one another above yourselves. There's much more that we have to do with one another, but you see how he gives us instruction. So I'm not just saying, hey, you're my Christian brother. I get instruction here on what that looks like. You'll see where I'm coming from. It won't be just me saying it. It'll be me displaying what I just read and so much more because the Bible shows that. And then we see that God must come before any and everyone in our lives. We see in Matthew 10, verse 37, he makes this clear. Anyone who loves his father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. So remember, because I said the minute we get kids, the kid will be not just our priority, they'll run our lives and it dictates everything we do. That's wrong. I see so many parents do it, and man, they would kill you if you said otherwise. But God said it very clearly here. He said, if you love your son or daughter more than me, you're not worthy of me. It means you're not being the Christian. You're not in this relationship correctly. And I'm actually putting my child in danger. But when I love my child through him, get this? As part of everybody else in my life, through him, I protect my child and I truly love and respect God. Right? So it's very clear, and I understand that I can't use those speeches as some people use that people may see noble and put these family members above God. If I truly love my family members, then you'll see me doing what God says, not my version. But you don't see that today. You see, God must come before any and everyone in our lives, as I said. So that's why you have to realize, am I loving them more? And the way you'll know you're loving them more is you'll do some of your own actions towards them. You'll love them your way, not what the Bible says. You'll make sure they dictate things you do and not Christ. You understand this? And keep in mind, goes into, like I said, if we do the first part of the two commandments, is we must love all. Okay, we must love all. There are people who really dictate and say they're Christians and they hate. And it's so common today. Like I said, there are churches that hate, and they'll use their reason. It could be race, it could be gender, it could be sin. Now, it's not right for me to hate people who sin. I want to hate the sin, absolutely. But I got to love the people. We're going to see that a little later. And that's why he shows in Matthew 22, 39, 40. He says, and the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. Okay? So when I love my neighbor as myself, I love me by loving God. So I got to love my neighbor by loving God. Pastor, how do you love God once again? By doing what he commands. So how I deal with everybody is going to be from what God says, which means I'll love them. It disturbs me when I see these organizations put together their own rules and ignore godly rules. We'll label certain people and then we deal with them the wrong way. There are communities we have rejected that God did not say to reject. Do y'all get this? I don't know how that's going to go for people that participate in that, right? But I don't think it's going to be good. We have to love all. It's part of the commands. It covers every command. Do you understand this? So let's kind of break down. We're going to pick groups of people and see what he says about them. First of all, when it deals with marriage and the family. First of all, marriage itself, how do we deal with that? And not just ours, others. It first shows us in Matthew 19:4-6. Haven't you read, he replied, that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Now, first of all, I want you to understand, because you got a lot of people, they want to look for a verse that says homosexuality is wrong. And people say, I don't see it say directly that. Now, it shows homosexuality is a sin. I think it's in 1 Corinthians 6. But they'll say it doesn't really show this exact command. See, right here, it shows us the only right answer, which is implying all the other answers are wrong. So when he says God made them male and female, and this gets rid of any polygamy, and you got people diving into that nonsense of polygamy. Also, he gets rid of that also. He says, and the two will become one flesh. And the other way we must understand is my relationship with my wife, and anybody who's married, we got to stop seeing it as two separate people. I know this is hard today because we struggle. I don't know that person. And this is why you got to get to know a person. This is why, and I'm talking about without the physical intimacy in that time of courting, you do it to get to know them, because you're going to make a decision in which he says, and the two become one flesh. In fact, he says in verse 6, they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate. And we still hear, and on the human sense, I understand this, but we still hear Christians who are having their own bank accounts, their own property, their own ways. They do their own thing. I mean, if they had enough money, they'd have their own houses. They separate, even though he says you're no longer two. And he gives us a warning there. What God has joined together, let man not separate. And you see in the marriage itself, the one that are supposed to be one, separating. He didn't say do that. But like I said, in a human sense, I get it. But who am I supposed to obey? We're supposed to obey God rather than man. That's that relationship in marriage. And then we see another relationship. In that marriage, we're going to see the roles. So I don't just say I'm a husband and then do it my way. The minute I do it my way, do you see where I'm going with this? Then I no longer love God in that. Wait a minute, Pastor. Do you see where I'm going? You may call this extreme, but he says this. He gives us clarity on my role in that position. Look what he says for husband. Husband in 1 Peter 3:7. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives. In other words, I always have to consider her. Too many times we get those men, all they hear is I'm the head. And they'll just make decisions and basically tell the wife, this is what we're going to do. Sometimes you got wives that do that same thing. Both are wrong. And we're disobeying God when we do that. But how it should look, because look what he says. He says, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and heirs with you of gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. So what he's showing us is I, with my partner, who's my wife, have to make every decision. It can't be when the kids see you, they see two of you, they need to see one. So if you guys are not on the same page, you get on the same page. And the same page isn't my page, and the same page isn't her page. I stress this to both spouses, okay? Don't ever put the other spouse in a position that if they're not 100% in line just with what you want, you give attitude, you give distance, must understand now you're becoming a stumbling block, and you're going to have to answer to God. Has nothing to do with what you feel is right or wrong. Has everything to do with, hey, I now need to get my body in line and make sure we're using God to get in line with that. It says likewise, and for wives in 1 Peter 3:1, wives in the same way, be submissive to your husbands. Now remember, this word submissive is not subservient. All right. The reason why most people caught on and they removed obey out of marriages, because that's not what he said. See, if it was obey, then it would be subordinate. Then it would be subservient. He rules, king. No, no, it says submissive. What does that mean? Recognize his role. Recognize his role, right? And like I said, it says, be submissive to your husband, so if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. Because the role of the head, which I don't have here, and you can read that in Ephesians 5, like I said, I just took pieces because you want to understand the sound doctrine, and this is why it's going to be so important for you to do your own studies on each of these groups, and you'd be surprised on what we're responsible for doing and how we deal with each of these. So if I recognize in my role as a husband, and my wife recognizes that same role, you'll see here recognize, well, we are partners, but he's the one that's responsible for us. Do you understand that? And in her doing this, it ministers to those who really don't believe. Because you look today, you got a lot more women who are dedicated to God and following him. And instead of, I'll hear some wives browbeat their husbands. He didn't say do that. He says, so if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over, watch this, without words, by the behavior of their wives. What is that behavior? That behavior is going to display this reverence. If you read further, you would see he would go further on how you living for God is going to minister to that husband. But it doesn't work when you just yell at him and tell him what he shouldn't do, not tell him what he just shouldn't do. You see where I'm coming from? And the same thing goes for children. Children in a young age are too irresponsible to know this command. So this command is for the parents. Especially this one right here, when he says in Ephesians 6, verse 4, this one's for it. He says, because we have another one when you go study each of these groups where it tells the children to obey their parents, of course. But that's for the parents to train them, to raise them to obey. Time after time, I keep hearing parents telling a parent, children telling a parent no, telling them what they're going to do, ignoring them when they make a rule. We're ignoring God when we don't do something about it. Now, when it says in Ephesians 6, verse 4, fathers, do not exasperate your children. In other words, don't frustrate them. I heard one child, once again, trying to be clever, saying, well, it frustrates me when you make me go to church. No. You have to understand, going back up to where it says, we obey God rather than men. You see, if anybody in this world, if me truly giving you God causes you to stumble, if me giving you God and me raising you causes you to be frustrated, there's nothing I can do with that. Parents, you're doing the exact thing. So when he says do not exasperate your children, that goes with my rules, my ways, my attitudes, my temper. Do you see where I'm going with that? I have to make sure it's not that. How I say things, when I say things, if I say things. But he gives us instruction on what we're supposed to do with our children. He said, instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. There are parents who do a great job to make kids good citizens, but we do a horrible job making them godly children in order to grow up to be godly adults. You see the problem here? We'll engage them on what the world says how to raise a child, but we're very careful on not raising them to obey and to revere God. And overall, concerning others' marriages, Hebrews 13:4 says, watch this, marriage should be honored by all. I've seen too many marriages where there will be that other element. Do you understand that? And it exists in more than not. And this goes for the in-laws. I stress this to the in-laws. If you see in any way you're in the way, I mean, you have to consciously get out the way. Too many times I see where we'll play blank and we'll go, well, I am her father. I am his father. You understand that? And we get this honor, not realizing I am now having them disobey God. What am I doing? Am I honoring the marriage? Am I? And I'm going to talk about because you said some words that you thought were wise. Are you honoring it by when they say something, go, oh, no, that's between y'all. I mean, you even reprimand your child where you go, what are you doing? That's your husband. That's your wife. You understand this? To where you're making sure I'm not getting in between. That goes for friends. And you know, when I hear a spouse say, that's my friend, you don't accept my friend, and you don't accept me. No. Didn't you just read this as the two become one flesh? That friend must understand. That friend has to know them two So if my wife has a problem with my friend, we got to work on it, right? I've seen cases where the wife or the husband had a problem with a friend, and the other one goes, "Well, I knew them since I was a child." No, no, that's not how it works. You understand it? If part of your body is affected by something that you're allergic to, you don't just go, "Well, I'm taking it anyway because I like the way it tastes," because it affects the entire body. That's what he's saying. So if my wife has a problem, and vice versa, if I have a problem, we have a problem. They don't just go, "Oh, well, we have to agree to disagree on that." No, 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 no. And you must recognize that. It must be honored by all. And the marriage bed kept pure. That is very clear, not only for the married couple, for people on the outside. So people commit adultery, people do things, people participate. And like I said, people are getting caught up in these having open marriages, having people participate in marriage. None of that is from God. And he made very clear, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. He gave us a warning. He presented that to us, and we need to recognize that. Let's look at another group. How are we supposed to deal with unbelievers, believe it or not? 1 Peter 2:11-12. It says, "Dear friends, I urge you, first of all, we got to know our roles again, as aliens and strangers in the world." See, the alien part, because you hear when we talk about migrants today, they don't belong to that place. So we have to recognize, I don't consider myself an American or even an African or even an earthling, if you will. You understand that? I consider myself heavenly. So to this world, I'm an alien. And I try not to live familiar with. When you're familiar with something, it becomes part of you. We need to become strangers to it. So I don't come here going, "Oh, I understand why they do it. My culture does this because blah blah blah. That's why we're going to do it." I've seen one where they came from Hawaii, and they call themselves Christians, but then they do these things out of the Hawaiian culture, which is connected to other forms of worship. That's a problem. But they'll kind of say, "Well, it's part of my culture." Is it? Now, if it was just something that your culture did out of entertainment, out of enjoyment, that's great. But if it becomes a part of worship, which goes against what God said, do you see where I'm going with this? But when I'm an alien, I'm a stranger, all I know is what God says. He says, as we're here, I have to do something, abstain from sinful desires. He even gave me a warning when I'm dealing with unbelievers. I'm going to feel desire for these things of the world, the wrong things of the world. And he says, abstain from that. Don't let that rule you. Because he says, watch this, which war against your soul. He's basically saying, my flesh is going to go, but I really want to do that. And your spirit's going to go, but no, we can't do that. And your soul's like, what do I do? But we have the ability as Christians to say, oh, I'm going to follow the spirit. Not in line with the spirit, flesh, we're not doing it. And then around them, this is mandatory. He says in verse 12, live such good lives among the pagans. I don't go out and get some Christian community and move everybody away from the world. No, I'm supposed to be among the world, in the world, not of the world. Do you understand that? Live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may, watch this, see your good deeds and glorify God. Remember, they're unbelievers. But if I live a certain way, that's my biggest form of ministry. See how I deal with them? I don't just come up to them and say something they don't understand. More and more, I keep hearing them talk about Christian things that I understand that the Bible said was very clear that it's going to be foolishness to them because they can't understand it. But you still got those who think I'm going to shove Christianity down your throat. I'm going to say a bunch of things you don't understand and then say I did my part. Once again, you're going to have to answer to God. Right? It also shows how do we deal with worldly authority. Remember, I said there's much more on a lot of these things. So do your due diligence. Make sure you study. Make sure you get these. So authority in all relationships. Authority in all relations. 1 Peter 2:13-14 says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake. And I love how he puts for the Lord's sake. So the submission doesn't come because I want to. The submission doesn't come because your pastor said so. It doesn't come because your community does it. No, you're doing what God says. He says, make sure you do it because you're going to have to answer God for this, to every authority instituted among men. Now, of course, we obey God other than men. That's why it's so necessary. If they do something and they harm others, we're supposed to be a voice. Remember, it tells us to support, uh, the oppressed, the poor. These are commands we're supposed to do. So when, like I said, you heard me when I'm frustrated sometimes when we then bring the law in a way to disobey what God said. If I know, let's say we have one of the authorities that's doing wrong to some people that don't have a voice, I'm supposed to be a voice. I don't just go, well, you do know it's against the law. Do you see how we can play games? We can mock God instead of going, shouldn't there be a different way of handling this? He made clear, whether to the king as supreme authority or to the governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. That's their job. And of course, they don't always do it. But I am supposed to submit myself, understanding that's their position. If I like or dislike the president, does not matter. Does not matter. And you'll hear people usually say that when their person's in office. Oh, I'm going to pray for my president is what they'll say. But when their person's not in office, then you hear them saying some of the most disrespectful things about the person in office. We hear it in every place. You understand? And there's a difference between disrespect and truly, not slander, explaining something that's being done wrong. Know the difference. 1 Peter 2:17 says, show proper respect to everyone. You understand that? That goes to my boss, to my coworkers, to people I see, and this comes from every race. You have groups of people out there that hate other groups of people. There's no way those people are going to heaven. Do we get that? I don't care how y'all spin it, because I've met too many people that call themselves Christians and hate groups of people. And when I say hate, I'm not talking about a feeling, because they'll be the first to tell you, no, I don't hate them. No. Remember, hate is how you treat them, just like love is an action. Remember, he says, if you love me, you'll do what I command. Isn't that what he said? Not my own distorted, corrupt version of love. No, he said, no, that's how the love's going to look. So same thing with hate. If it doesn't follow, and if it's not for everybody, I'm doomed. Because how I judge is how I will be judged. So it shows us that we have to do that. It even shows how we deal with authority. We all go to work. Back in the days of Israel, when Israel had slavery, I'm going to go over slavery itself, because a transatlantic slave, just to kind of give you a spoiler, was illegal based on God. In fact, it made very clear the people who participated in that should be put to death. The people who enslaved should be put to death. But that's a story we can talk about, just let everybody know. But slavery did exist, and God did allow certain things with the Israelites that are hard to take, but there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that are hard to swallow. We just trust our Father in that. But what we're not supposed to do is apply those things in areas where God did not say to apply them. So when we're talking about in the workspace or as slaves, it says in Ephesians 6:5-8, slaves, obey your earthly masters. Now it's obey. Once again, as long as they don't make me do nothing against God. I go to work. I don't care if my boss is younger than me. I don't care if my boss is older than me. I don't care if I don't like my boss. I don't care if I think I'm smarter than my boss. If they're my boss, I have to do what they say at that job. Right? I hear people who blatantly say, and these are Christians, I'm not doing it, because I don't think it's right. How can you say that, Christian? He tells us, obey your earthly masters with respect and with fear. Keith, why are you doing it? Because he asked me to do it. Only way I'm not doing it if it goes against God and his commands. You understand that? That's why he says, here's that word again, with sincerity of heart. In other words, I'm going to do it because God said so. And that's why he says, just as you would obey Christ, I'm going to do exactly what he says. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you. You have those people who are very good at making a person or conning a person, bribing a person in what they say. But when their person's not around, then they go to a whole nother person. Once again, that person's a fraud. He says, but like slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart, serve wholeheartedly, as if you were serving the Lord, not men. All right. We have to make sure we're in a mode that God is going to get me on this. We may have work reviews, but those are meaningless. It's going to be, what am I doing for God? Because you know that the Lord will reward everyone for whatever good he does, whether he is slave or free. God catches you. He gets it. I don't care how I feel about it. I'm just doing what you said. If I said, I think it was stupid what he was doing on that project, so I'm not doing it. And nowhere was it a sin, what he was telling me to do. And nowhere is it going against God, which still would be a sin in there. No. If it gives me something to do and I just don't like it, you see where I'm going. I still have to do it, or I better find another job. I'd be dead wrong just to go, I'm not doing it. How to deal with subordinates if you're in a position of authority. Ephesians 6, verse 9 says, and masters, treat your slaves in the same way. With that same respect, that same sincerity of heart is what he's talking about when he says in the same way. And then he says, do not threaten them, since you know that he who is both their master and yours in heaven, and there's no favoritism with him. You have a lot of people who demand certain things of their workers that they would not do. And that judgment is going to really beat them up. Any of you who are in a position of authority, you are extremely held accountable. Extremely held accountable. Recognize that. Do you understand this? He also shows us even how to deal with our enemies. In Matthew 5:43-46, it says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemies, right? He says, but I tell you, this is Christ, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. He's talking about groups whose purpose is to harm you. Their goal is to affect you. Do you understand this? And he's telling you to love them. And he says, when I do this, he says that you may be sons of the Father in heaven. That means I'm representing him the way I'm supposed to. Too many times we don't like somebody, we have an attitude, we're very cold to them. It's not what he said to do. Made clear, he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So it's not for me to change how I'm going to deal. Do y'all get this? Then he also shows us how we're supposed to deal with spiritual Christian leaders and spiritual messages. Watch what he says. Hebrews 13, verse 17, it says, obey your leaders and submit to their authority. Now, there's that obey again, but this is different than the authorities put together by men, which we're talking about the people in those roles. No, he's talking about ministers, and pastors and teachers in that position. What he's saying is, as long as we're not going against God, you follow. I still get those people who struggle. It could be because of my age. It could be because, and not just with me. I see it happen with ministers all the time, right? We do all these struggles based on how we feel, how they make us feel. So I'm only going to obey if I'm okay with it. You're setting yourself up. It does struggle us who are in this position because we still have to present what God says, right? But to make sure, that's why it says, obey your leaders and submit to their authority. He says, they keep watch over you as men who must give an account, right? As men who must give an account. What does that mean? How I am as a spiritual leader with you better be based on God, because that's what he's going to check on. So if I notice you didn't like how I was doing it, do y'all get where I'm coming from? And I changed it, I'm in trouble because I'm doing it to please you instead of reverently presenting him. That's why he says, obey them so that their work will be a joy, not a burden, for that would be of no advantage to you. I get pushed back many times. It's not going to change me, but he's absolutely right about this. I've had those times where I'm like, I am done. That's the way I felt. Of course, I'm not going to be done. I'm going to stay with him. And I want to make sure I have that. But you see what it does to those who are put in a position of accountability. And like I said, concerning all spiritual messages, what does he say to that? 1 John 4, verse 1, he says, dear friends, do not believe every spirit. And you see, all this stuff works in a package. This isn't I do this and ignore this. No, hopefully you're getting, I'm showing you dealing with people. How do we deal with people? He tells us how. So I got to know what he says and apply it. I don't go out and do it my way and say, God bless it, when he already gave me instruction. So when I'm hearing a message, he tells me very clearly in 1 John 4, verse 1, dear friends, do not believe every spirit. Makes that very clear. Do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. I've had, when I was a young minister, some of the worst advice. I had people who told me if a minister taught it, I better just respect it. Some false nonsense, but you can't go against them. They're a minister. That's what they would say. And I'm like, well, wait, what? But what if what they're saying is wrong? Right? Once again, this is their interpretation of what they thought they should do, of how they thought they should handle this, not following what God said. Are you with me? You see this? So all of this comes down to what we call purposeful ministry to all. This is how I now make myself set up to be used by God for everyone. That's why it says in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 19, though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone. Remember, if I'm a slave, I belong to. And so it's saying I'm acting like it to you, but I'm doing it based on God. So what is my purpose for doing it? To win as many as possible. So when he tells me how to do it, I don't go, well, I don't see it working, and I have another way of doing it. No, I do exactly what my Father tells me, to win as many as possible. It's not going to work on many, but I trust God by doing what he says. So he solidified it in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 22. He says, to the weak, I became weak to win the weak. And he had a bunch of other ones as well. And we look at that. I don't care if I dislike a group. No, I become like that group in order to win that group. He says, I have become all things to all men, just in case your group wasn't covered, so that by all possible means, I might save some. Now, when it all comes down to it, for all of this to effectively work, and this is the reason why we don't do this, the reason why we do it our own way, we must recognize and remove personal values and replace with Christ. Any values that you've built, and we all have different ones. There's certain things that mean a lot more to me. There's things that mean a lot more to you. It could be activities, it could be items, it could be people. But the minute I allow my value system to dictate how I am, I've already corrupted what I'm supposed to do. Watch how people raise their children. They usually raise them because they value their children based on themselves, not based on God, which they don't understand means they don't value their children. He gives this clearly. And he repeats so much into this to make sure you got to get this. He says in Philippians 3, 7 through 9, but whatever was to my profit. So in other words, whatever I did that I thought benefited me, whatever I did that I thought benefited me, he said, I now consider a loss for the sake of Christ. Now what I do is I go to Christ and do what he tells me, not what I think I should do. I go to Christ to do what he says for me to do. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? He says, what is more, I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. In other words, Christ is going to trump everybody. It's going to, I don't care who I like. It's not going to be some party I'm part of. It's not going to be some ideology. It's not going to be some book I read. It's not going to be somebody I say I respect. None of that will ever overwhelmingly go against. None of that will. Do you understand that? I'll already know this and say, if it goes against Christ, whatever you say, it's gone. I don't want to say not to read books, but you better be careful because a lot of people read books and they'll make that adjust to what Christ said. Remember, Christ is the word. It'll make them go against what Christ said. And we see that happening all over the place. It says, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them rubbish that I might gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from